The ISC is an incredibly important organization, especially with the work that we're all trying to do, which is to focus on collaboration. So we actually do look at all aspects of sanitation and all the partners involved. This is the last session, so for that, thank you once again to everyone who's still here. This session actually will reference something that Mr. Ashish Chauhan had brought up right in the beginning, which is the BSE SAMMAAN, the tool that will aim to make it more efficient to use CSR funds in the space. And for that, I'd like to invite to the stage Praveen Chakravarti, please.
Good evening. I realize it's fairly late in the day, so I won't keep this too long. I think essentially what I will do here is explain what SAMMAAN is, which is, at least to the best of our knowledge, one of the world's first initiatives structured along exchange in this traditional stock exchange concept. So this is the CSR exchange, and the germination of this was really after India passed a new Companies Act of 2013 that nudged corporates to donate a certain percentage of their profits to CSR activities, and that's well known. So really the idea here was, I think some of the numbers are known. There's a fairly unorganized industry of donors and recipients, and this activity had been going on. And the exchange, in some sense, thought that this lends itself very well to an exchange framework. And if you think about it, was sitting in the exchange where many decades ago there used to be stock trading that happened right here. And what were people doing? People are buying shares of companies from each other. But you could have done that without an exchange. I could have bought a share from anybody. What is the role of an exchange? The role of an exchange is that of a trusted intermediary. When I buy a stock or a share from somebody else, I don't know if it is indeed a genuine share of a company that it represents. I don't know if the price I paid for it is right or wrong or determined fairly. The world does not know, or the rest of the society does not know, that I've actually bought this share from this person at this price, all of which are good things. That's why there is a stock exchange. Some of these basic concepts apply to the world of CSR, or corporate social responsibility, in India post this rule that kicked in. So the entire goal was donors can still choose to find their own recipients. They can still donate money. But what can an exchange do? An exchange can play the role of a trusted intermediary, which is bring transparency to this process and enable easier transaction facilities and settlement, to use an exchange terminology. So that was really the germination of this idea. Oops. What did I do? Okay. Yeah. So that's, I don't want to kind of bore you with some of the details, but I'll just give you some broad numbers. Sitting right here, there are about 1,300, 1,294 to be precise, that are companies that are listed on the BSE that have to comply with this rule of 2% of CSRs. You've heard some of these numbers before. What this means is really a total sum, and I recognize a few foreign faces, but I will use Indian rupee terminology, which is 7,850 crores. That's, think about $1.2 billion in a year. And that's based on some rough math, about 2%. But here's the key reason for a platform like SAMMAAN. A lot of people focus on the top 10, 15, 20 companies, and sure enough, out of the 7,850 crores, nearly 6,000 crores have to be spent by the top 1%. But the long tail of it is what needs SAMMAAN. There are close to about, as those numbers say, 510 companies that have a budget of less than 5 crores. These are companies that do not have the resources to have their own CSR teams, to go find NGOs and causes to donate to. There are 663 companies between 5 to 10 crores. So the long tail of this list of companies is really what SAMMAAN is targeted at. And these are companies that are saying that we will have, I need to find a credible NGO in a cause that I believe in, or sometimes in a geography that I'm located. And I want to make sure that this is fairly legitimate and done in a very transparent manner. And our guess is there are close to about 1,200 such companies listed in the Bombay Stock Exchange. And they do not have any resources to do any of the research and diligence work by themselves. And that is the target audience for SAMMAAN. So now, I've listed the broad needs and the reasons for why we need SAMMAAN. I'm just going to skip through a lot of these because I do hope to take some questions if there are any, because that I think is far more important. Where are we today? And let me tell you a little bit about who are the partners of SAMMAAN. So because there is an exchange concept to this, the BSE developed the platform using its exchange team. And just to be clear, this is not a revenue-generating activity for BSE. It's not intended as a business vertical for BSE. This is BSE trying to be a good corporate citizen by itself. So the other two partners that came on board, that were recruited on board, were the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, which is a body under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs that some of you may be aware of. So that's the government side of SAMMAAN. And then the CII, which is the industry body, Confederation of Indian Industry, that has close to about 15,000 corporates represented. And there are various benefits to donors and recipients, the transparency part, and I've met a lot of nonprofit organizations that are doing great work, but the one thing that I've consistently heard is we've had so many people come to us and say that we will rate you, we will do due diligence on you, and if we do this, you will get access to funding. And they said after all of that, we've found no money coming. So just to be clear, we said this, we're not going to charge anything to the NGOs that will actually list themselves on this platform. And what is listing? And I am deliberately using terminology that is associated with the stock exchange because that's the concept I want to ensure that I keep reiterating. So how do NGOs come on board? How do nonprofits come on board, or implementation agencies? They go through what's called a listing process. Essentially, go to the website, you apply to be visible and be registered on SAMMAAN. We work with a group of associates, as we call it, associate partners, of which I'm proud to say Dasra is one of them. And because we recognize that we do not know much about this industry, so our associates help us in doing diligence and actually going through a process to verify the authenticity of these NGOs. And what does verification and what of this authenticity mean? We actually have Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs that will run certain checks across 6 different ministries. We obviously have to be cognizant of the fact that there are lots of uncertainties about legitimacy of various nonprofit organizations in the country. So the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs runs checks with 6 different ministries and all it does is gets a no objection certificate. And I want to be very clear, SAMMAAN does not play God. SAMMAAN does not say which is a good NGO or which is not. SAMMAAN does not say what is a good cause or what is not. And deliberately, there is an attempt to bring on as diverse a set of nonprofit organizations and implementation agencies as possible, which could range from obviously the poverty alleviation programs, education, livelihood, as well as organizations like Olympic Gold Quest that can find future Olympians for India, or organizations that can do restoration of heritage buildings. So there is a deliberate attempt to bring in variety, and very often we get the question, will these NGOs be rated? And like I said, the SAMMAAN does not play God. There will be no rating. The entire idea is to bring in transparency as much as possible. So I just then want to quickly, because of lack of time, I just want to quickly tell you where we are today. So the initiative was launched by the President of India in April of last year. And then we took 6 months to develop the technology in the platform. And the platform was open to corporates in the last week of December, around Christmas. So we currently have 662 NGOs that are on the platform. These NGOs have various projects that are listed. So the total number of projects are about 723 that require a funding of about 1,240 crores. So that's the status as far as implementation agencies or NGOs are concerned. Now this, and if you want to kind of drill down a bit by sector, this is, understandably education, livelihood, and health are predominantly the largest sectors. But the next step really is an outreach effort that is actually shepherded by CII, our partner, and taking this message and this list of programs that are available out to all the corporates. So we have about 250 corporates that have registered on SAMMAAN, and in the process of going through their diligence as well as their shortlist based on various criteria. And so all of this is about 2 months old as far as the corporate outreach effort is concerned. So our hope is that we would be able to get these NGOs and implementation agencies all the money they need for their projects. With that, I'll take questions if we have time, and if there are questions. Yeah, I see one hand.
Hi, I'm Angad from Dasra. Just one question for you is, I think this is a great initiative. I just thought if you could speak to the journey of how this came about, or what prompted you to do something like this. I mean, you've spoken about the stock exchange and how you're doing it because you think it's just being a good corporate citizen, but is there something personally for you in terms of something you hold dear to your heart, or just to talk about the journey a little bit?
Sure. I was somewhat involved in through various committees in the drafting of the Companies Act of 2013. And of course, at that time, the big pushback was why this tax, and largely from the corporate lobby. Why are you imposing a tax? It's an indirect tax, and who are you to say? So very, and too often when even today when I talk to people, they say there's a mandatory 2% rule in India. And what many missed was, this is actually perhaps one of the few laws in India that actually do not mandate anything. It does not mandate 2%. It says we encourage you to spend 2% of your profits. If you cannot, please lay out how. So when I was going through this process, and I realized there is such a heavily regulated and directed mindset as far as the corporates are concerned, I in some sense feared that actually the intent of this may fall flat, may fall between the cracks. And then so to that extent, it was a little bit of a personal responsibility I felt, having been on some of the committees that actually drafted not drafted, but that was involved in the discussions of these rules. I just felt it was important to ensure that it actually translates into implementation. So that's really how this journey began. Yeah.
I was just wondering if we could go back to your slide, which listed the different categories.
Okay.
So while I understand the need to categorize for people to start to think where they want to put their funding, just throwing out this thought that there are often overlaps and there are often nuances which a categorization will never be able to capture. So just to take an example, providing life skills, which has been identified as something which is very critical, especially because mainstream education is not something that can be provided to everybody. So whether it's through sports or otherwise, just again, it's more food for thought as you go along, because to start with, I think this is great, but how can we get funders to also understand that there will be broad buckets and they need to have a wider umbrella as they think through their areas of choice, and not narrow it down very specifically, is just, I think, a thought that I wanted to put out.
Sure, thank you for that, I appreciate that. Just to clarify, these are, we don't actually categorize this, the platform doesn't categorize this, we ask the question. We present a list of choices and ask the NGO, which category do you want to be? I fully appreciate that this could span multiple categories, and something that we need to be aware of. Yes?
One question. Is this initiative, about which I've never heard before, is it the first of its kind in the world, having a stock exchange, if you can call it that, for NGOs?
You know, it's a question that comes often, and I've actually done some digging around to find out if it's indeed the first. It turns out that, you know, a platform that mimics an exchange for corporate social responsibility, it is a first. The Brazilian stock exchange has something that talks about companies doing CSR and having a separate category for listing. The FTSE, the London Stock Exchange, has what's called the FTSE Good Index, which is all about trying to get investors to put money into companies that do a lot of CSR. But I have not certainly come across any of the large exchanges anywhere in the world that has actually developed an entire platform along the principles of a stock exchange.
Hi. Yeah. Straight at 12 o'clock. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is Samir Unale. I'm the State Mission Director for the Swachh Bharat Maharashtra. So thank you very much for organizing an event which is my day-to-day work here. It's great to come here and see a lot of corporates willing to work in urban sanitation. So my question is that at the state of Maharashtra, we have almost need of maybe 1,000 crores. I will stand up, don't worry. Yeah. I have need of almost 1,000 crores here. And we would like to be the most CSR friendly state in India. We would like to be as flexible as possible for the states to, for the corporates to participate in Swachh Maharashtra mission. A question I wanted to ask you is that how are we supposed to get our projects into your CSR exchange? We'll be having over 50 odd projects which could be listed in your portal. So how are we supposed to list our projects on your portal? Thank you.
Sure. If I understand the question right, you're from the government of Maharashtra and you think the government of Maharashtra has projects that could potentially list here. The only thing that we ask for is these should be projects by a non-profit trust or a non-profit organization that will qualify under the CSR rule. If your projects are indeed structured that way, which is a non-profit trust that's set up separately, then we have 4 associate partners. All of their contact details are listed on our website. And all of our registrations happen only through our associate partners, only through these 4 partners. We do not have NGOs coming directly to SAMMAAN, but it has to come through one of these 4, and they are listed on our website. That's, like I said, that's one of them. And I think there was one last question.
No, that's fine. It got answered just now. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Praveen, for that. It was really interesting to see the details behind the BSE SAMMAAN that was initially brought up this morning. So with that, we conclude, but I would want to say just a few things as a takeaway from the day. I think all the panel discussions did bring up some key important issues, which was we are moving beyond just toilets. Either you can call it ODF plus, ODF plus plus, but at least the discussions are now moving beyond just looking at construction of toilets. Understanding the entire value chain, which a lot of the participants who were here were able to talk in the panels, but even beyond that, the way some of the partners of the foundation were able to talk about their work would also allow the rest of us here to continue to learn that only by looking at the entire value chain and closing that loop will we actually be able to solve the problems that we see on a day-to-day basis. And we also know that it has to be a sustained and long-term effort. With that, I would like to thank a few people, starting with the Bombay Stock Exchange for hosting this for the third year and for believing in us and believing in what Dasra was trying to do, and for also the work they've done with the BSE SAMMAAN. I'd like to thank Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and their partners who have over the last 5 years and continue to supported over 60 plus organizations with a deep investment and a long-term commitment. And most of those partners are working across the entire value chain. And hopefully you have heard from them today and you will have a chance to hear more. We'd like to thank the Bank of America for supporting Dasra in a report that was looking at gender mainstreaming and looking at adolescent girls, another part of the value chain that needs to be addressed and focused on. Samita for helping us moderate the session on thought leaders, the Tata Trust, and I will end with thanking all of you and also Krishna Ben, who was from MHT, the beneficiary, because ultimately it's people like that who are going to benefit from the work everybody is doing here, and I think it's important to keep that perspective in mind. Thank you, everyone.